I got into a debate yesterday with a guy, and this inspired me to delve further into an issue which I previously touched on in an audio titled Exposing the Sabotaging Lies in Two Modern Social Justice Movements. So in that previous audio, the sabotaging lies I pointed out were, one, that biological races actually exist, that being the lie, and by not acknowledging that as a falsehood, you're actually supporting racism, because racism is the belief that one biological race is superior to another biological race. But if you don't believe that those biological races exist in the first place, you can't then group one, or refer to one as superior than the other. And so by not recognizing that social construct of biological races, you're actually undermining the cause, which is to reduce racist violence in the world. And the other sabotaging lie that I pointed out was this idea that genders don't actually exist, that they are a social construct. And I pointed out how this is actually also sabotaging for people on an individual level and a social level. So on one hand, we have people convinced that something that is actually a social construct is not a social construct and is actually a reality. And then on the other hand, we have folks saying that gender inclinations and roles, natural differences between men and women, is a social construct when it actually is not. So completely backwards. And in both cases, serving the purpose of divide and conquer and empowering the already powerful while disempowering the population. So the debate that I had yesterday was focused on the latter issue of gender roles. Started as a conversation talking about the trend in media and entertainment to make men more feminine and display women as more masculine, and how this is supposedly a positive thing. It's like an advancement in society to do this. And I just, casually brought up my dislike of that, and then this led into a debate, because when I voiced any disagreement to that trend, it then seemed to trigger a programmed response, which was to inform me that gender roles are just social constructs and that they're sexist and particularly bad for women. And so part of this debate brought up particular logical fallacies. And the way I was identifying it at the time, one logical fallacy in particular, but I say fallacies with a plural because it actually goes by a few different names, which I'll get to in a minute. But during the actual debate, what I said was, you're pointing to the exception as if it's the rule, rather than recognizing the rule as the rule. In other words, I was pointing to something that has been generally true for the entire human population for all of time, and he was pointing to some exceptions to that as if it disproved what I was saying, which is that this is generally true. And it didn't disprove that. But this is oftentimes something that comes up in debate where someone's defending a position that isn't really valid. They think that if they can point to any exceptions, that they've completely disproven the other perspective, which is simply saying, this is what is true, generally speaking, right? So what I was saying was true, generally speaking, is that women have a natural advantage, a natural strength, a natural skill, a natural inclination to be nurturers. And this, of course, is supported by the biological component of giving birth to children. But I wasn't saying it was solely a biological duty or something, like they're just doing it because they have the baby. I was pointing out that women, generally speaking, actually find nurturing a baby satisfying. They actually find it to be a satisfying experience. They find it to be something that suits them on an individual, personal level. Like their own mind and soul is aligned with it. They're not doing it because they've been told they have to do it. They actually enjoy doing it. They have a natural inclination towards it. They have a natural skill toward it, more so than men. And then on the other side, I was saying that traditionally speaking, men have had a natural inclination to be a protector, and that there also is a biological support for this, right? Being the physical strength being generally greater. But that again, it's not just about the physical side, it's about the mentality, that men actually find it satisfying. They actually have an inclination in general to be a protector. That this is a role that they voluntarily choose to follow. That it's like in their DNA, you could say. They're wired to have this strength and desire fused together, and how this is beneficial for society, for men to have that inclination and for women to have their inclination, how they're completely complementary, right? Because we need both in society. We need the nurturing and we need the protection, right? And all I was saying that this is just a natural good tendency, inclination, that is actually valuable to society. And I was being told that I was ignorant for not recognizing that there are exceptions, and other words coming at me were like, you're, chauvinist, and you're caught in the past. He said I, belong back in the 1960s. I was surprised he didn't say 50s, but anyway, he said the 60s. And animalistic. So all these like derogatory terms, basically trying to make what I was saying into something it's not, right? It's like, that's a big thing nowadays, is people will oftentimes label someone, sexist when they're not actually saying anything sexist, or they'll label someone racist when what they're saying actually isn't racist at all. But then ironically, those same people actually push ideas which are racist and sexist. So again, with the race issue, they'll defend the idea of biological races, even though that's a falsehood, and even though that actually is the founding subconscious belief that supports racism. So they're actually pushing racism when they're supposedly fighting against it. And then likewise, folks that say they're fighting against sexism and fighting against like anti-women sentiment in particular, they are actually pushing anti-women sentiment, because for one, this was the common thing that came in the debate yesterday, was the constant counter-argument that I received, or these logical fallacies that kept coming my way, pointing to women as being protectors, being strong physically. I find this actually to be sexist in a way, because it's saying that a woman isn't equal to a man unless she can demonstrate traditionally masculine characteristics, namely physical strength. So, he was talking about women being strong fighters or excellent athletes. And the irony here is it's actually saying that women are equal when they can be shown to perform masculine roles, at an equal level, right? So it's actually denying their equality as a feminine creature, as a feminine woman, which is different than a man, but equally good. Denying that and saying, well, there's nothing there of equal value. So what a woman has to do is actually become more masculine in order to become equal. That's actually sexist. So, the irony runs deep with these so-called social justice warriors and the programming that they've received. Another element of this to keep in mind is that by men becoming more feminine, this does actually serve people who you could say are, at the top of the pyramid, so to speak, that are, in some way or another controlling a population or attempting to control a population as much as possible, right? If you have men who lose their masculine inclinations to be protectors, to be warriors, they're going to be more docile, they're going to be easier to manipulate, right? Additionally, by making men more feminine and women more masculine, you're actually disrupting a natural harmony that exists just on the interpersonal level as far as sexual attraction, right? Feminine women being attracted to masculine men being attracted to feminine women. By making the women more masculine, they're becoming less attractive to men, and then likewise women who are naturally feminine are not going to find a feminine man attractive. So it's causing disruption at that level as well. And then even deeper still on the individual level, since I believe when we actually recognize our inherent nature as men and women and what those natural inclinations and strengths are, we find pathways to satisfaction, right? Again, women find nurturing, generally speaking, naturally satisfying, as men find being a protector naturally satisfying, being a leader naturally satisfying. And by denying that and by being steered away from it, you're actually being steered away from a mentality and activity that would not only satisfy you the most, but would actually enable you to be of most service to your community and society. So it's sabotage on multiple levels. And another way that this has occurred beyond the psychological is on the physical level, wherein estrogenic chemicals have just coincidentally been put out into society at a huge, ubiquitous scale. Many are familiar with the chemical BPA, which is an endocrine disrupting chemical that mimics estrogen. But even in the now non-BPA plastics, a lot of plastic bottles and containers you see now will have a label on it that says non-BPA because of the awareness of this negative health effect of BPA. It's been found that even the non-BPA, the non-polycarbonate plastics, still have chemicals that have estrogenic activity. So they're still having this feminizing effect on men in particular. Another one that's been confirmed is the pesticide atrazine, which has literally turned male frogs into female frogs. And this is, again, widespread in our food supply and water. And again, why would there be any agenda behind that? Is this purely accidental, or could it serve a purpose? And obviously it does. serve a practical purpose. Again, a population is much easier to control if the men are more feminine. And if the women are more masculine as well, because that just causes further disharmony and division among the population. And that's the classic divide and conquer strategy, which the whole race war situation serves as well, right? So both are disempowering, both serve divide and conquer. Both are pushing lies. One, a lie that something that isn't real, biological races, they're saying is real, and then something that is real, actual like traditional gender inclination and roles, they're saying isn't real. So completely backwards view of reality that is causing disruption. But unfortunately, people are embracing this propaganda as if it is woke perspective, right? Which leads me to a couple quotes that are appropriate here that you may have heard before, but in this context I think are worth repeating. So one is the famous one by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, and that is, quote, "None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free," unquote. And then one from the book Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, "Most men and women will grow up to love their servitude." And one of the things that came up in the debate yesterday that I thought was particularly important, particularly telling, was at one point he said to me, "I don't need to be a protector. Nowadays we have the police. Nowadays, we have alarms on our buildings." And to me that was really interesting, right? So he was saying that he doesn't need to be a protector because we have the state now. They're taking that role. I can be a more feminine man, and that's okay. He was talking about painting his nails with his little girls and how that's a wonderful thing. And he was actually averse to even accepting the role on any level of being a protector. When I said to him, "Well, don't you feel a natural inclination, or don't you think it's good for men to protect their families?" And he got very upset. But again, wouldn't acknowledge that as just being a basic fact of human history and, just a general observation. Again, he talked about, "Oh, well, my wife is actually very capable, and, she can use the gun too," and this kind of thing. And I was saying, okay, but why are you so against the idea of you being a protector? And, what I realized afterwards was that he had been convinced that his natural role as a man is toxic, right? So anything that I was calling traditional male role, he equated it in his mind, because of his programming, to being toxic. And so he didn't want to associate it with that at all. He didn't want to say, "Oh, sure, I want to protect my family." Like, he didn't want to say that, because in his mind he had been convinced that that's toxic. That's actually somehow chauvinist or sexist. So it's just a total disregard for the reality that these roles that men and women have a natural inclination and strength for are not bad things, and that they actually are equally important, equally good, and they're completely complementary, right? So no acknowledgement of that, and instead it's just spewing out this programmed, triggered, response that, "Oh no, gender roles are just a human construct, and if you disagree, then you're chauvinist and you're ignorant and you're, caught in the past," and blah, blah, blah. Just all these kind of slanderous responses, which would fall under the ad hominem logical fallacy. So I received ad hominem as personal attack against me, There was a couple others I won't even mention that would fall into that category. And then there was the, exception to the rule fallacy, as I call it, or as other authors refer to it as the biased sample fallacy, or the misleading vividness fallacy, etc. So I hope this is somewhat enlightening to you if you've been convinced that this whole gender role revolution is this empowering thing. It really isn't. It's actually disempowering. It's actually sabotage that has no doubt been fed to you via propaganda channels, via sources that you think are trustworthy and legit, but meanwhile they're just communicating what they want you to think, because that view is going to undermine your own well-being and empowerment and that of society at large. Another Aldous Huxley quote I'd like to share here from Brave New World as well is, one believes things because one has been conditioned to believe them. And then another is, those who meant well behaved in the same way as those who meant badly. And so this, to me, hits on the fact that well-meaning people are going along with these so-called social justice woke movements with good intentions, but it's actually just causing them to behave in a destructive way, not dissimilar to the people that have actually put forth this propaganda in the first place, who have ill intentions. So good-intentioned people are doing the bidding of those with bad intentions because they're unaware of the fact that they're being tricked and that they've been fed propaganda, to the point where a man will have an adverse reaction to even the idea of being a protector of his family. Just think about that for a moment. He got upset by the idea of protecting his family. Right? How deep and tragic of a mental, psychological manipulation is that, where a man has been convinced that protecting his family is chauvinism or sexism, right? It reminds me of folks that were convinced that kneeling to a state flag is equivalent to an act of rebellion, right? When they had that theater going on in the football scenario with the football player. So it's pretty sad that people don't recognize it, and it's definitely destructive. So I hope this helped bring some light to this darkness a bit, and that you can recognize that men and women having natural inclinations that are complementary and equally good is not a bad thing to point out. It's not a bad thing to realize. It's actually a good thing to recognize that we, and this is getting more into just my own opinion, so I've already mentioned the particular logical fallacies that came up in the debate. If you disagree with my opinion, don't lose sight of those fallacies. My personal opinion, which others share too, is that this is not just a political agenda, but it goes deeper than that, where it's actually, you could say, satanic, in that it's against the design of humanity, right? If humans were designed a certain way, with intelligence and good intention, men designed to be generally a certain way, and women designed generally to be a certain way, and when they both adopt those roles that they've been given, those natural inclinations that they've been given, that it's going to result in the greatest harmony. By attacking those roles, by attacking that inherent design, it's actually an attack on creation. It's actually an attack on the original intention of the Creator for humanity. So in that sense, it's satanic. It's against creation. It's against the Creator's design, right? And to believers like myself, it's clear that the Creator is aligned with the good, because when we do align with that natural design, that original design, we do find greater harmony and personal satisfaction. But when we align with these completely opposing ideas, you end up with just the opposite. You end up with more disharmony, more destruction. And that's exactly what we observe now with relationships. There's more division than ever between men and women. And this just so happens to coincidentally coincide with this whole, rebellion against gender roles. I don't think that's a coincidence. It's absolutely, absolutely in my mind, a correlation occurring there. And the other thing that you can observe is that the happiest relationships are where you have a masculine man and a feminine woman, where you have a man who has his kind of stoic strength as a protector and leader, and then you have the woman who is dominant and skilled at being a nurturer, better communicator, better, emotional understanding, and helper as well, and how these two are completely complementary, and that when a feminine woman finds a really masculine man that she can trust to be a good leader and a good protector, that actually empowers her to follow her own natural inclinations and to embrace her own femininity and find greater satisfaction by doing so. And this isn't just me hypothesizing. There's many, many women that testify to this very thing, that they found greater satisfaction by embracing their femininity, not by rejecting it and trying to become more masculine. And likewise, you can find with men who have become more feminine, they don't tend to be very happy individuals, right? They tend to be high-strung and bitter and kind of confused and unhappy on multiple levels, right? And so you have evidence that by abandoning our natural inclinations, our natural strengths and dominant natures, we've gone against the grain that would actually result in the greatest satisfaction for ourselves, would actually result in the most harmonious relationships, and would support a stable family unit, which would also be a positive thing. Another thing to keep in mind with all this is that one of the main elements and tenets and programs of Marxist ideology is to undermine the family unit, right? The idea is to break up the family unit so that you can then have the state come in as the, surrogate mother-father, the substitute mother-father, who then guides them and controls them more completely. So again, this divide and conquer and anti-intelligent design agenda is serving the same purpose of supporting the powers that be and undermining our own personal empowerment and social and interpersonal harmony that we can experience. So again, the logical fallacies that most often come up, though, are the bias sample, or the part to whole, or as I call it, the exception is the rule fallacy. So be aware of that. If you're defending these agendas, likewise, if you're speaking out against them, so that you can identify them and hopefully help turn people back to reality and rationality, and stop actually sabotaging the movements that they think that they're supporting, so that they can actually support greater harmony among men and women. All right, thank you for listening.